Romans 1 says, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who hold the truth in unrighteousness, because that which may be known of God is manifest to them. For God has showed it to them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen." You see how God's saying, look, everybody's on the hook. No one's off the hook. Everybody knows internally there's a creator because I've revealed it to them. Being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead. So God's saying, people know I'm the creator because they look around and I'm manifest in nature. They know this stuff just didn't happen. So they are without excuse. Because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. And they changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like a corruptible man, and to birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. Do you know this is still going on today? That's their four-footed beast today, the corruptible thing that's not in the image of God that people like to worship. Secularists worship this in a way because this is Schrödinger. This is what they think humans evolved from, this little rat. They say it crawled in a hole when the dinosaurs were getting extinct, crawled in a little 3-foot hole and hid out when the asteroids were bombarding Earth, and that led to the mammal line, that led to primates, that led to humans. That's where they think we evolved from. But don't you see an interesting correlation here? They changed the glory of the uncorruptible, eternal God into an image made like corruptible man, and into birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. And then we have this. But it gets even worse. Here's a Natural History Museum in Washington, D.C. It's got a little throne room. And on the outside of the throne room, it says, "Come meet one of your oldest relatives." It's like a shrine. They have these big pillars here, and they've got the mammal orders going up here. And then you walk in, and you think, well, my gosh, what do they have here on a little altar in the middle of this little shrine throne room? Well, that's what they have. A little golden rat that they say we evolved from. Isn't that uncanny? The saddest thing I've ever seen in my life that brought me to tears, that's creation related, is in this same museum. You can go over to a little spot where they have a whole bunch of computers, and this place was crowded. There was like 40 people there trying to do this. They had like 6 different stations. You walk up and you choose your human evolution icon. It could be Lucy or Homo erectus or Neanderthal, whatever. And it would take a picture of you, and it would superimpose a picture of Lucy onto your face. Kind of merge the two. And then I realized, okay, I see what you're doing, Satan. You have an insatiable desire to corrupt the image of God. Amen. Who's the image bearer? We are. We're made in the image of God. And so you go to the Natural History Museum, and they're like, hey, take a picture of your face. We'll take some ape icon, the image of an ape, and smush it over your image of God. And I'm sitting there watching people line up to do this, and they have no idea how they're participating in the mockery of God. It was sad. You can't get mad. You just have to be sad about it. But in the middle of this little shrine room, on the altar, they have this little creature here, and they say, but a close relative of this tiny creature was the first mammal on Earth. Its DNA was passed on to billions of descendants, including you. So that's the little 4-footed creature that they're worshiping today. But Jesus said, the Pharisees came up to Jesus, tempting him and saying unto him, "Is it lawful for a man to put away his life for every cause?" And he answered and said unto them, "Have ye not read?" Then he goes on. He says, guys, haven't you read the scriptures? Haven't you read Torah? And then he quotes from Genesis 1 and Genesis 2:24. He says, "That he which made them at the beginning made them male and female. And he said, for this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and the twain shall become one flesh." So what does Jesus say? At the beginning, God made them male and female. And that same Torah says right at the beginning, as Adam and Eve were made as the capstone of his creation, everything was done. They were the last things made. They go out, and what did they do? They named everything, took dominion over everything, and when they slipped and fell into sin, everything was corrupted. Romans 8 says the world groans under the weight of sin that was started by Adam and Eve. And Luke 3 talks about, this is just kind of a paraphrase here, it has the whole lineage going back over 70 generations, taking Jesus all the way back to Adam. So who was before Adam? Nobody. Adam, the Son of God. Adam didn't pop out of existence from some ape. We're not made in the image of apes. It goes God, then Adam, and then all the way 70 generations later we have Christ. So here's a quick video that talks about how important that is.
Without a real Adam, a real garden, a real tree, and a real enemy that led Adam and Eve into sin, the consequences for sin laid out in Genesis 3 has no foundation. And without this, the gospel and the entire New Testament has nothing to stand on. Because of the sin nature we inherited from Adam, we are all in need of a Savior. That's the very foundation of the gospel and the New Testament.
So there's lots of people running around today. You can look at different groups like BioLogos, and they're promoting widely the idea to Christians all over the world that we evolved from either a mythical Adam or ape-like creature. So you've got our Savior dying for the sins of a mythical person, or someone who evolved from apes that was already killing and doing survival by the fittest kind of stuff. Very, very interesting. So atheists see the problem if you don't have a real Adam. Check this out. This is written by an atheist. This atheist said, no Adam and Eve means no need for a Savior. It also means that the Bible cannot be trusted as a source of unambiguous literal truth. It is completely unreliable because it all begins with a myth and builds on that as a basis. No fall of man means no need for atonement and no need for a redeemer. So people know this. If you don't have a real Adam who is spoken into existence by God, breathed into existence and made out of the dust of the earth, the whole gospel starts kind of unraveling here. So, all right, so let's review some of the evidence for humans being created first. I went over this already in one of my previous talks, and we're also going to cover Lucy again tonight, and that's about a 5-minute clip, but it's all going to be repeat. But it's important to cover some of this stuff twice. In fact, there was a student of Dave's who was at a field trip who was in San Francisco at the Natural History Museum, and she was there with her class, and people were just gazing up at the Lucy icon that they have here. And this gal, a Christian, said, well, we didn't evolve from Lucy. And she talked about the wrists that were stiff that she could walk on and the sloped face. She had all the facts there, and she shared it with her public school class. Very interesting. So this stuff is technical, so we will be covering 2 topics tonight that we've already covered previously. And this is one. We talked about the idea of the interdependent nature of a key and a lock. A key does nothing. It's worthless without the lock socket. And same thing with the lock socket, doesn't do anything without a key. It's an interdependent system that's just like your car. Your car has these 5 different components. You've got your flywheel here, which is going to start your engine. You've got a starter and an alternator and these cables that connect it to your battery. Not only do you need all 5 components, they have to be connected in the order that they're shown here. You start changing things around, you're going to blow up your battery, or you're not going to be able to start your car. It's an interdependent system that obviously demands a designer. These things will never form themselves randomly. The human ear trumps the lock and key, and it trumps the starting system by a factor of about 1,000,000, because we have 5 separate systems here. So you've got your outside ear, a pinna, which is designed for trapping air molecules that I'm pushing around the room here. Goes down 3 inches to your tympanic membrane, wiggles these 3 little tiny bones that upsample the pressure by another factor of 22 when it gets into your cochlea, which is filled with fluid, that convert this leverage system to a hydraulic system, to a chemical system, then to an electrical system. And all 5 of these had to be designed by a designer, because you've got sound wave trapping device and you've got a mechanical system with these little bones that create leverage by a factor of 1.7 converted to a hydraulic machine that upsamples it again by 22 times, then into a chemical system, and then into another chemical system in your brain. So that to me is quite obvious that humans were breathed into existence with those components put in the right order at the right time. You can't evolve a system like this. It all has to be present. And people understand, you know that intuitively. This is Romans 1 talking to you, that although they said that they didn't know God, God made it clear because he revealed himself in what he created. That's quite obvious. Okay, the next one is DNA design. So we'll look at a couple of short videos about DNA here.
Let's start by looking at DNA, a protein coding language that cannot be replicated by any scientist in the world. It's the most sophisticated information storage system in the known universe. Nothing comes even close. In fact, over 10,000 DNA molecules can fit on the head of a pin, and unfolding just one of them reveals 6 feet of instructions capable of building who you are. Stretching out DNA in the trillions of cells in your body could reach to the sun and back hundreds of times.
That's amazing. Again, it screams design. I mean, you can take thousands of DNA molecules, put it on the head of a pin, just take one of them and stretch it out, and it's got 6 feet of information on it. Very, very amazing. And here is what an animation, this just came out a little while ago, showing what's happening in your body right now when your DNA is being replicated. It's a 20-second clip. This is a very, very realistic animation of what's going on in your body right now as your DNA is replicating. So we've got billions of these molecular machines that are copying your DNA. If that's not a machine, I don't know what is. I mean, do you think people could build that? That's impossible. It's happening at the molecular level, and that part, the last clip right there was in real time. Here's another one we'll look at. This is gene transcription, and they're going to slow it down, and then they're going to put it in real time. This is happening it's a transcription of genetic code from DNA into RNA. This is just one stage that happens in your body. So they're going to show how complex it is here in a minute, then they're going to speed it up to real time. So that's what it looks like when you slow it down, DNA going into the RNA there. This is all happening in your body. And then look what happens when they go into real time. So God is God of the big sauropod dinosaurs, and he's God at the molecular level also. Okay, so what about DNA? Does it reveal any evidence for creation? Well, in fact, it does. If you look at mitochondrial DNA, this one's a little bit more complex to get through, but let's watch a short video about this.
Evolutionary researchers have based these timelines on the assumption that humans and chimps shared a common ancestor about 5 million years ago. That date was based on counting the mtDNA and protein differences between all the great apes and timing their divergence using dates from fossils of one great ape's ancestor.
So evolutionists have theorized, in part based upon the mutations of our mitochondrial DNA, which is the DNA that's passed through the maternal line, that they say, well, we think it would take lots and lots of mutations to go from chimps all the way to humans, and we think it was about a 5 million years ago process. And then we're learning things like this. They've compared now observed mitochondrial DNA. They took a couple thousand people, put them in a study, and looked at how quickly our mitochondrial DNA is actually mutating, how frequently the mutations occurred. And they expected, based upon what they thought of branching from apes to human, they thought, well, there should be one mutation every 6 to 12,000 years, or one mutation in every 300 to 600 generations. What they observed was one in every 33 generations they're getting these mitochondrial DNA mutations. What does that mean? Here's how one science writer interpreted it. She says evolutionists are most concerned about the effect of this faster, and I'll insert their observed mutation rate, not a theoretical one, but an observed one. For example, researchers have calculated that mitochondrial Eve, the woman whose mitochondrial DNA was ancestral to that in all living people, lived 100,000 to 200,000 years ago. That's based on what they were thinking. But using this new clock from the observed data, mitochondrial Eve would be 6,000 years old. Well, where have we seen that number before? Very, very interesting. That was a huge study. So we've all heard that the idea that we evolved from chimps and that we're 98% the same. You all heard that before? Oh, the myth says our DNA is 99% the same as chimps. Do you know that if you were to go ask DNA specialists now in every college around America that knows these studies, they would admit it's completely wrong. What they did to come up with that 99% estimate, when you hear the elevator quip that says, oh yeah, well humans and chimps share 99% of their DNA. When they came up with that number, they ignored and discarded 1/4 of our genome at 18% of the chimp genome. They took the 3 billion base pairs of the human genome and about the 3.1 billion, because chimps actually have about 5% more genetic information than humans do. And then they cut out all the strips that weren't overlapping and left only the ones that were. So by the time you start removing all of the dissimilar clips from our DNA in chimps, you're left with only about 84-85% similar. But we're also similar with a ton of other mammals, because God's using DNA to build gene instructions to make mammal types of creatures, just like humans are. So the 99% myth has been debunked. Ask someone when they say, oh, haven't you heard we're 99% the same as chimps? Say, well, you know, when they came up with that, they discarded 1/4 of our genome and 18% of the chimps. So not a true myth anymore. We'll cover over this one quickly. Another evidence, I think, for creation is blood coagulation. A friend of mine is the number 2 guy in charge of a huge health system here in California. He's a creationist, and I said, give me your best shot. What's the best evidence as a medical professional? What's your leading evidence for creation? And he almost interrupted me and says, well, it's obvious, blood coagulation. And I said, well, what do you mean? He says, well, Dan, don't you know that when you get a cut, things happen at the biomolecular level, at the chemistry level, where 5 different independent steps start happening, and if you can't evolve the 5 steps. Every creature that doesn't have these 5 steps in the order that we see them would have just bled out and died. You have to have the 5 steps complete. It's a system. They have to all be there present at the same time. You can't reverse the orders. They all have to be there at the same time. So that's real good evidence. Everything that would have evolved would have just bled out before this design was put in place. And let's see, we have a video here on this one. Oh, no, we don't. We skipped that one. Okay, evidence number 5 we put as the overwhelmingly weak evidence for human evolution. So let's just go through this. The number one thing to look at when it comes to human evolution is the changing stories. So here's a human evolution tree from about 100 years ago. That's the idea they would have pitched to my grandpa or great-grandpa. They've got different creatures on this tree that go on here. 1927, they changed it up again. 1931, they've added some and removed some. But you know, in the first 3 ones here, they have Piltdown Man and Java Man, which were either frauds or have been proven to be apes, but they carried the lie for 50 years. Carried all through the idea of the human evolution tree. 1951, you still have some false icons in there. Then they changed it in 1965. For every generation, there's a new story. Every single generation. And it doesn't get better with modern charts. Here's the new modern chart. This one came out by Richard Klein, and he says, well, we think now this is the tree, but they're no longer calling it a tree, they're calling it a bush because it's so convoluted. And they insert all of these question marks. Every one of these question marks is, shucks, I don't know. We can't figure it out. And it goes on, this is from Scientific American. Look at all of the breaks in the branches. Every one of these breaks in the branches here is scientists saying we can't connect these dots. That's why it went from a straight up tree to a convoluted bush with a whole bunch of broken branches. And now they go on with studies like this to say, well, look, we've still not found the missing link between humans and apes. That's from Earth. It happens all the time. The human-ape missing link is still missing. That's from the journal Evolution. They're never going to find it. They're going to find extinct apes, but nothing less. Oldest fossils of our species push back origin of modern humans, and they say the oldest bones of our species dating back to 300,000 years have now been discovered in a cave in Morocco. So they go on and say that we're going to have to push back the origin of Homo sapiens by, just 100,000 years. It just keeps changing and changing and changing. Happy 350,000th birthday. A study pushes back Homo sapien origins. So it happens over and over again. One of my favorite things to look at is the scant, scattered, and sifted fossil record. We've got lots of these things. We've got no transitions, or some things that maybe look like transitions, but no clear transitions. We've got over 7 billion humans alive today. These are infertile. These are infertile. There's none of these. And we would expect, if human evolution was true, we would have a long, just like Charles Darwin said, a big organic chain showing all these transitions. But you can take all of the supposed transitions and put them into the back of a pickup truck. Very, very limited information. That's what Dr. Ian Tattersall said. He's from the American Museum of Natural History. Here's his quote.
Emeritus curator with the American Museum of Natural History noted that you could fit all the supposed ape-to-human fossil evidence into the back of a pickup truck if you didn't mind how much you jumbled everything up. With centuries of recorded history and over 7 billion interfertile humans on the planet today, we should certainly have more than a truck bed of fossil evidence if evolution was true.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting to think about it that way. Okay, the other one is big inferential leaps or big guesses, and they have consistent exaggerations and contradictions. How about Lucy? Has anyone been through public school and learned about Lucy before? Okay, good. Artie's probably less common than Lucy, but we'll take a look at Ardipithecus. So they found this supposed leading fossil in Ethiopia about 1992. It took them 17 years to reconstruct it. It was based on only 125 bones, which is less than half of the skeleton. And Artie's big claim to fame is that they think that they found one of the first upright walking ape-like creatures. And we'll look at the evidence that they're basing that on next. So they thought she was supposedly walking upright, and they based that in part based upon her squished up skull here. So they have 100 pieces of her broken skull that were squished to the width of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, about 1.6 inches compressed. And they took these 100 bones and they said, you know what? We think that she probably walked upright because of her foramen magnum and where it's located. We learned last night about Lucy, how her foramen magnum, which is the hole in which your spine inserts, is usually back on chimps compared to humans, where it comes straight up to the middle of the base of our skull. So that's not much evidence to go on, is it? So when you look at the foramen magnum here, it's not even present in this video scan that they have here. So here's, when you take the 100 bone fragments and put it together, boy, it sure looks like an ape skull to me, doesn't it? And there's not much to go on there. And this one doesn't show the base of her skull. This one does. This is what her skull when they put it back together, but you can certainly see there's not much of the base of the skull, and everything else is very, very scattered. Here's what they have with the foramen magnum of this hole right back here, which is set backwards like chimps are today, and they only have about half of it. So, but they claim that's part of our evidence is based upon where that foramen magnum is, but they only have about half of it. They also say, well, we think her spine had a human-like curve to it. And they base that, they say we think her lower spine had a curve to it. Where's her lower spine? They literally don't have it. And then they make some inferences here, and they say, well, based on the reconstructed and digitized hip, Dr. Lovejoy assumed that Artie must have had a human-like lower spine curvature called lumbar lordosis. They also gave her a couple of bonus vertebrae in their imagination, because Lovejoy acknowledged that chimps and gorilla have 3 to 4 lumbar vertebrae, but Artie, he thinks, had 6, because he wants them to match what humans have. Humans have 6. So they don't have any, and rather than inferring that she probably had 3 or 4 like a chimp, they said, no, she probably had 6. It's based on complete imagination. Here's how apes' spines curve, like one shallow C, and then humans have 4 curves, cervical, thoracic, lumbar, and sacral, which really helps us to walk upright. They're inferring this on Artie based upon almost nothing. But they're saying that's what she probably have. So much, much different. And here is an animation that they had of Artie walking.
The shape of the pelvis confirms that Artie was some kind of early biped. It's now clear that millions of years ago, bipedality did evolve in our African ancestors. So, Walking upright must have provided some huge biological
No
advantage
spine.
for the earliest hominids. Bipedality was a positive that
Now they gave her a
outweighed
spine
all the
and it's
negatives.
curved like
What
humans.
advantage did it bring to our early ancestors?
I mean, they're reaching really, really hard in that video. Okay, so here's Artie, an artist's rendition of Artie, and here's a bonobo, a modern cousin to a chimpanzee. Looks similar to me. Look at her toe hanging out there. It's called a hallux. It's designed, God gave apes toes for hanging up on trees. So based upon a little bump on her pelvis, an imagined lower lumbar vertebrae, a couple of extra imagined lower lumbar vertebrae, and half of the foramen magnum, they say she was an upright walker. Guess after guess after guess after guess. So here's what her feet look like. This is Artie. She's got this hallux that goes out to the side. Humans have no feature like this at all. Chimps have it because they get around in trees. Look at this. This is a foot right there. Try doing that with your big toe someday. So very, very interesting. Okay, we're going to speed through Lucy here because it's getting late because I think most of you were here last night when we covered this. So this is what they sifted through to find Lucy. Hundreds of pieces, bone pieces, were scattered across a 3-meter area of a hillside. It's where they found her main stuff. 50 square meters and 20 tons were sifted to result in only about 20% of her bones. They put a lot of effort into doing that. So here's what they found about Lucy's skull. It was sloped and ape-like. All the brown pieces are what they actually found. The rest is just plaster of Paris imagination. And they learned that it was sloped and ape-like, and her spine entered into the rear of her skull at a slanted angle, just like chimps do today. And with that slope of a face, your field of vision is not going to be very good for bipedal walking. You're not going to be able to see where you're going very well. So that sloped face is not good at all for walking. And that's why humans have a straight front of the face. And look at these things that they've done here, comparing the walks of chimps, Lucy, and modern humans. This is how they make Lucy look like in textbooks today. But look at this. They put her spine straight up into her skull, but scientists admit, no, it came at an 18-degree angle, and it was more set back than humans, where it comes straight up to the base of our skull. Big differences. So these are all secular science journals, and they say, yep, came in at an angle like this because she would have been in a forced, hunched-over position walking on all fours. And here's what the data shows. Look at that. Look how slanted they are so they can lean over and walk on all fours. Humans would have a really hard time doing that. And the semicircular canals, we've also learned that the posterior and anterior here were 50% smaller in Australopithecines. They were just like chimps. And this is where we get our balance from when we're walking upright. It's these two, which happen to be much smaller in chimps and much smaller in Lucy's kind because she didn't need them for walking upright. And they've also included an accidental bone here, but an extinct Ardipithecus. They've learned now, just a few years ago, they came out and said, whoops, we're wrong. There's no way this bone belonged to the Australopithecine species. It belonged to an extinct type of gibbon here. But you go into museums and that bone is still there today. And they're still having a hard time deciding what gender Lucy should be. Is it Lucy or Brucey, or is it Lucy or Lucifer? That's a very interesting choice of words there. Her wrists could lock into place for knuckle walking. Very interesting design. There's a concave and convex locking system in her wrist here, just like chimps have today. So she could lock her wrist into place for knuckle walking. Humans go straight across like that. We don't have that feature at all. And even her fingers were curved, even by ape-like standards. And those curved finger digits allow her to swing from trees much, much better than humans could ever do. And CNN just came out with this video based upon some forensic experts that looked at the green stick fractures in Lucy, where they learned that her arm bones were snapped with what's called a green stick fracture when she tried to brace her fall by falling 40 feet out of a tree. The forearm and different parts of the leg bones were bent backwards, and they kind of splintered before they broke. So they determined she was trying to brace her fall while she was dropping out of a tree 40 feet. So it's rather ironic that the chimp that stood up is dying by falling out of a tree. You know, she's not walking around like humans. And we played this last night, but I don't think we have sound, so listen to this video. This is by the founder of Lucy, Dr. Donald Johanson.
We now have 400 specimens of Lucy's species, Australopithecus afarensis, named after the Afar region. And we know that there are very large individuals, which were males, and the smaller ones are certainly females.
So as they're parading this huge parade of all these hundreds and hundreds of complete upright walking skeletons, what he actually means by 400 specimens is this picnic table of little bone pieces. 35% of the collection is just teeth. Here's Lucy, but they absolutely exaggerate it because Dr. Donald Johanson says we now have 400 specimens of Lucy's kind, and they parade a whole army walking across the screen. They're all upright, they're all walking, but this is what they actually have, is enough to scatter a bone, as many bones as you can scatter on a picnic table. Very, very interesting there. And here's what Lucy looks like when you go see her in museums. This is the Lucy at Answers in Genesis. This is what she probably really looked like. She's got walking wrists. She's walking hunched over. But when you go to secular museums, they give her eye whites. She's standing up. They give her imaginary hands and feet. They didn't find Lucy's hands or feet. She's walking upright. She's looking around. In this case, they got her a kid and a husband, and they took all the fur off. This is in Japan. So they're making her look more and more human to deceive people. It's quite obvious what's going on there. Lucy with eye whites, Lucy in deep thought. Now she's a philosopher. And to the poor 10-year-old kid that doesn't know anything better and looks at this, he's like, oh yeah, he doesn't know anything about the eye whites. He doesn't know they didn't find her hands and feet. It's quite sad what's going on. Homo habilis, this is the best typeset of bones that they found for Homo habilis. This is the next stage in human evolution, they say. As I mentioned last night, they show all kinds of Homo habilis creatures in lots of textbooks, but their count of upright or of complete Homo habilis fossils is 0. They've never found a complete one. It's just a mix-up taxon of about 100 different bone fragments that they invented an icon to group that set of bones. This is the best set of bones. Originally it was found mixed with some accidental bones from other creatures, so they pulled those ones out. This is what they have left. And so here's one of the most telling things you can learn about Homo habilis. The name Homo habilis means handyman. So they think humans by this stage were starting to walk upright and starting to think with their brain, do some cognition and making tools. But let's learn about this hut foundation that they found in the same area that they found Homo habilis bones.
The evidence that humans were actually the inhabitants of this site is also confirmed by a 12-foot circular foundation made of lava stones for a hut shelter they found in the same archaeological bed where Homo habilis bones were found. Paleo experts even describe this circular stone foundation as having a striking similarity to the dome-shaped hut shelters still made today by nomadic people in the same area. But it gets even better. They actually found the stone circle in a layer beneath Homo habilis bones. Now, that's not faring well for the theory of evolution.
Isn't that interesting? They found a human-built structure below the bones they found Homo habilis on. So how does that work for their theory? It completely debunks it. Because humans were here building these stone structures that had 6 different pillars, 12-foot circular radius. They found almost all of the tool debitage, like the tool discards for stone tools, outside the hut. They found the bones from when they were eating outside the hut, and then on top, in a layer higher than this, they find Homo habilis bones, but they say these evolved from those. That one thing alone throws Homo habilis completely out the window, and there's what the stone's hut circle looks like. And big circle, about 12 feet in radius, and here's a very similar idea of what people build today in the similar regions of these stone huts. And they can do thatch works. People have been doing these circular huts for a long, long time. Let's go on to Neanderthals. So that's the last line up here. So when I was a kid in school, or when my dad was in school, or my grandpa was in school, this is the Neanderthal that we got. He's a half man, half ape, this brutish beast, and he's out there getting ready to club stuff. He's got a big old club here. And he was betrayed. This is in the London News. Everybody growing up about Neanderthals viewed them as cavemen, prehistoric kind of cavemen. But then over the last 10 years, we've learned all kinds of stuff about these creatures. They were completely human. That's the current stance of scientists. They had families with people we would call today as Homo sapiens, so they were interbreedings because they were just human. I mean, saying a Neanderthal is a caveman is like saying that they're like, when you compare the phenotype or the body style and characteristics of a Samoan to a Japanese person, there's lots of differences there, right? Neanderthals were just big, stocky guys, had thick bones, about 15% larger heads than some people. They were thick and they were living and surviving in caves after the flood. So they made instruments, they made weapons, they buried their dead with ceremonial burials. They would bury them with flowers and everything. And now they say that they're out combing beaches and went diving for shells to use them as tools. So they call them Neanderthal beachcombers. So they're clearly just humans. They were recently able to extract some DNA from the toe bone of a Neanderthal, completely human. They can sequence it. It's a little bit, you can mark human DNA from any different group and they can go back and show your overlap to Neanderthals, but they're just people. So that's basically the story. We have Artie here, they say 5 to 4 million years ago. Then she's followed up by Lucy. Goes on to the and this is all the bones we have for Lucy. Goes on to Homo habilis, only 100 bone pieces. This is the best type set that they have for Homo habilis. And did you know that in this next period that they say between 3 million years ago and 2 million years ago, they say the only fossils that they have for that period, you could take them and put them into a shoebox and still have room left for putting the shoes back in. A whole million years of supposed human evolution, and they got a half a shoebox of fossils. And that's because of their stacking and how they do it with radiometric dating and everything. But this is all a story. These are Homo erectus is humans, Homo sapiens are humans, Neanderthals are humans. Homo habilis is an imaginary mixed taxon, probably maybe some human fossils mixed in there with some Australopithecines, and Australopithecines are just extinct ape, and so was Artie was an extinct ape. Okay, so wow, we actually made through to the end tonight. I know we raced through a lot of this, and we went through Lucy twice, but I think that's okay because she's the predominant leader in 6th grade textbooks today. So with that rushed flash through all this evidence, let me see if I can pick up some questions here, and then we'll close.
Welcome to Genesis Apologetics. Our mission is to reveal God's truth about creation to as many students as possible. Students today are saturated by the world with the idea of evolution over millions of years. The Bible presents a much different history of Earth and everything in it. Most students today, even many Christian students, have no idea that the Genesis account is real history, including creation spoken into existence by God only recently, dinosaurs living with man, and a catastrophic worldwide flood. When students understand these truths, it helps them build their lives on God's Word, because it's true, both theologically and historically. For K-8 students, we have The Zone. Just sign up on our Student Zone page for free videos and curriculum. 5th through 10th grade students enjoy our Debunk Evolution program, where we address the top 10 pillars of evolution taught in today's public schools. Our Debunking the 7 Myths program is designed for students 11th grade through college. This program addresses the 7 leading myths about Genesis, creation, and the flood that are taught in today's colleges, even some Christian colleges. Families will enjoy watching our Genesis Impact movie before visiting natural history museums. This movie highlights a dialogue between a Christian student and a museum docent regarding the top 10 pillars of evolution featured in most museums. Finally, over 100,000 people have downloaded our free mobile app from the Google Play or iTunes stores. All our books and videos can be downloaded or viewed free from our website or YouTube